Hello, and welcome to Alternative Viewpoint. In 1887, Lord Acton said, "Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely." This became a famous quote and is often used to describe people who have attained a position of authority in society. Certain individuals who have no self-control will struggle to contain the desire to dominate those they consider their subordinates. Once they think they can get away with bad behaviour without impunity, they will tend to continue to push that boundary to the point of sadism or criminality. In this podcast, we will be discussing corruption within the Catholic Church. Many of us are familiar with stories of sexual abuse by the Catholic clergy. Fortunately, this is not one of those cases. This is a tale of priestly greed and corruption that centers around money rather than sex. I started working in the Catholic Church in Deptford in March 2023. In the beginning, the priest was delighted with his new secretary because I was exactly what he was looking for. I had extensive IT skills that I utilized to redesign the parish website that included an online mass booking form, allowing people to book their masses without being in church or even the country. This was a novel idea that had not been implemented in any parish regionally or indeed countrywide. I overhauled the parish finances from a rather messy, antiquated pen and paper-based system to a super-fast, automated, computerized system. In the beginning, the priest raved about my work to all his colleagues, and I was even asked to attend the Mystery of St. Paul event to meet his superiors. As time went on, things took on a more sinister turn as I began to see that this priest was not all that it appears. Let's listen on to find out what happened. The speakers in this podcast are Yen and Julia. Julia, have you had experience with any time when you've been in position and you've had like a senior person have a disagreement with a senior person and how they've treated you?
I'm having a disagreement at the moment, but it's many of us were employed by a producer who told us that she was going to pay us for the duration of, I think it was about 6 weeks in a run at a sort of well-known theatre in London. And then because she'd miscalculated and wasn't getting as much audience as she expected, suddenly decided to cancel the run. And therefore, everybody was expecting a lot more money than they got eventually. And now people's agents are up in arms about it and trying to get back some of the money because people had given up other jobs to try and do this job. And then they're left very shortchanged financially. But in this case, you could see that she simply miscalculated. She wasn't sort of being corrupt or unpleasant to anyone. It was just a horrible situation for both people. But I know that in your case, you have a situation where it seems to me grossly corrupt went on with a person who was misusing his power. Do you want to talk a bit about that?
Yeah, this happened to me last year when I started working at a local church, a small church in Deptford. I started as a secretary there, part-time, 16 hours. I started in March last year, and the priest who hired me, he liked the fact that I was very IT literate. I was very good with IT.
And so this is a Catholic church, and you yourself are a Catholic,
Yeah,
right? And
yes,
I also
I'm a
am
Catholic. The when I started with him, it was okay. It was fine. He had lots of ideas about what he wanted to do, the secretary to do. And like I said, he liked the fact that I was IT literate. He wanted like a new website. He wanted me to sort out the finance of the church.
Can I just interrupt there? Because when we talked about it before, I think you told me the situation financially was appalling, that there didn't seem to have anybody really caring about how the finances were run, anybody taking control of it, anybody really, in a sense, even understanding how you manage finances. Is that correct?
Well, I would say that the system was antiquated. What they were using was paper-based system mostly. They had a weekly collection which they would count the money and then they record it on sheets of paper. And then in terms of the income, in terms of the expenditure, that was recorded on a spreadsheet that was given to them years ago by the diocese, very old spreadsheet, which they would record the church's income and expenditure. And
so that sounds like a little bit like there wasn't an awful lot of transparency or accountability before you came, that things were sort of going a little bit awry financially anyway. Would you say
No,
that's
there was
true?
nobody keeping things. They had the previous secretary who was there. She was counting the money weekly, and which was mostly the cash money, but she didn't include the other money like the bank transfer and
So
the
it was
new.
sort of operating on a position of where everyone just trusted each other and trusted that people were being transparent and in any way sort of corrupt. Yeah. So that's how you found it, in a very bad state,
Yeah,
and in a sort of situation where nobody was really taking accountability. Yes.
yeah.
That's what you inherited. That's what I'm
That's
trying to
what I
say. Yeah.
inherited, and I find that it didn't work for me because it wasn't giving me a complete picture of the company's finances,
Hmm.
the church finances. We had, since started, he introduced Donor, which was a cashless collection system where you just touch your card in there to donate money, and that money wasn't being recorded anywhere. And then there are other people paying by bank transfer.
So where was this money going that wasn't being recorded anymore?
Well, I'll get to that. That, and then there was a bank transfer, which goes straight into the bank account where people pay monthly. And I couldn't really see how much that was being what the sum was either. So I learned Excel, and I spent a lot of hours my own time learning Excel because I had an idea of how we can bring all of these different sources of income together.
So you transformed his system, basically.
Yeah, I transformed the whole system. I created a workbook where where we can record the weekly cash collection, the bank transfer once a month, and also the weekly donor collection. And then I recorded it onto this Excel workbook. And from there, you can see in total how much we were collecting a week and a month. That gave us really a more accurate picture to see. And also, one of the things Christmas wanted was he wanted to see how Donor was performing, where people were actually actively using Donor more or still donating by cash. So you can kind of see a picture of
get
which
a
was
sense of what's
yeah.
coming in and how it's coming in.
Yeah, and also whether or not Donor was successful, since the implementation. So, so my workbook will have all this information in charts as well, so it shows you quite clearly.
And that was once you come, but before that, there wasn't anything like that.
No.
Great, brilliant.
And it took me a long time. I spent a lot of times on my own trying to do that. It took me I think about a month or something, and then I started looking, doing the same thing for the company's bank account. I started creating a workbook as well to record the company's incomes and outgoings. From the information for that, I took from the bank statements. I was given access to the bank statements, and I recorded that, and I started doing that. And again, that was also useful for Father because it enabled him to see how much money there is in the bank account before he makes any decisions about what to spend or not to spend. It gives him a good idea whether or not should he go ahead and pay 2,000-3,000 for this.
Yeah, it helps him.
We don't have the money to cover.
Yeah, so you were helping him understand where to spend wisely.
Yes. Yeah.
And also, didn't you revamp the website for him?
Yeah. So the idea of the bank was to give him an idea of how much money is in the bank account before he decides to make any expenditure. And the other thing I also did was I completely redesigned the website as well. But the thing with the bank situation was when I started doing all this transforming the church's finance, I found that there was money missing. The money from Donor wasn't being collected by the church. And I went to Father. I asked him where does the donor money go, and he says, well, it should go into the bank account. I said, well, I can't see it in the bank account. And he said, well, that's not possible because we only have one bank account, so it should go in there. And I said, no, I couldn't. So that when we started looking, and we went to Donor, and we asked what happens to the money from Donor. It turns out that the money Donor hadn't been paid for months and months, about 11 months in total since July 2022.
Where had it all been going?
It had just been sat at Donor's, well, they call it regime.
So it was their mistake in a sense. Well, I mean, it was a miscommunication between your church and Donor, yeah?
No, it wasn't. It was because the church bank account changed its name in July, and when Donor tried to make the payment, it was rejected because the names didn't match.
Okay,
on the bank account.
right.
Yeah.
So that sort of thing, which should have been spotted earlier, had been going on for ages. Which was
Yeah.
nobody was being deliberately corrupt. It was just that
Yeah.
he was completely not in control of the finances.
No.
And
Yeah.
then,
Yeah.
until you came along,
Yeah.
that would have gone on sort of forever, probably.
Yes. And then Regium after that, Regium did send an email after the money was rejected, but nobody picked it up, unfortunately, because the previous parish secretary, I think she was part time, but she didn't pick it up, and the priest didn't pick it up either. We finally discovered what happened then, and then we went to donor and said, please change the name of the bank account. And they did change the name of bank account, and we recovered about 18 to 20,000 pounds that had lain missing.
Mm.
And during this time, the priest was complaining there was no money, and he kept every Sunday he would ask the parishioners, we need more money, we need more money, we need you to donate for this project, for the church restoration and work in the presbytery as well, which is the priest's house.
Mm-hmm.
And the parishioners weren't happy because they said, well, we're giving money, where's the money going?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the parishioners weren't happy, and I think a few of them complained to the priests,
Mm-hmm.
and their complaints they were very upset about
Of course,
it.
because they were giving money, and as most people know, Deptford is a very poor area, so it meant a lot to them to give the money they gave, and they were seeing nothing for it because basically because of mismanagement at that point.
Yeah,
yes,
mismanagement. Yeah.
Okay. And then carry on, because I know that you're a bit concerned about the sort of things that he was buying for not just for his own use, but also for the church.
Yeah.
That seemed to be, considering it's such a poor area and people were giving their hard-earned money to him. It seems a little bit strange that he was using such top-of-the-range stuff. Do you want to talk a bit about that?
Yeah, so when after that, I also suggested to him that, when he told me about the complaints and we recovered the money, I suggested to him that maybe what we should do is produce an annual report, because they've never had that before. That gives the parishioners,
they would feel secure. Yeah.
Well, at the time, he had undertaken a huge restoration project. He wanted to completely restore the priest's house, the presbytery, and also parts of the church as well.
He lived, yes, and also the church, yes. Okay.
So the priest's house had about 5 bedrooms, bathrooms, and they would normally house 5 or 6 priests in that building. And he had gutted the whole building when he took over, because he didn't like the way it was. I didn't see how it was before, but there were previous priests who came and lived there, and they didn't find that. But he had rather high standards, and he didn't like the church the way it was. He wanted to modernize it. So he gutted the whole presbytery, and also at the time there was roof problems. There was issues with the roof as well. I think there was a leak or something. I mean, the church is old and it does need a lot of restoration work. And over the years, they have done some restoration. Unfortunately, the work wasn't very well done, and I could see just looking around where there's damages. So there was definitely the work that needed to be done.
So let's focus a bit on the sort of things that started causing you a bit of concern. Things that you sort of talked about, the irons, the fridge, things that seemed to be a little bit strange for someone who, as you were saying, as a priest, he was sort of really putting a lot of pressure on people to donate more money, and they felt it seemed a bit harsh. They were obviously quite poor anyway. And I know that you've also now spoken to a parishioner who is very angry about how much money has been given and donated to the priest, that they feel they don't really know where it's gone. So should we talk a little bit about the dissatisfaction from some of the parishioners who have already complained to you about?
They didn't complain to me directly. They complained to the priest. They sent him very strong worded emails, but he deleted them before I could read them. So that was around April or March. But there was also an incident after I started noting in the beginning. I didn't really. First few months, I wasn't really partial to his expenditure. I just see the bank account, and I started the bank statement. And then there was an incident where there was an accident where the bank accidentally transferred about 31,000 to one of the contractors, and that put the account into the red. Yeah. And what happens with that is that triggered audit with the archdiocese, and they immediately wanted to investigate this amount of money, and they said to Father Chris, we're going to do an audit in about June or July. They wanted to do that. And wasn't ready for the audit at all. And because, like I said, his record keep the finances was in a terrible mess and it wasn't very well kept. I had to work really hard. I spent a lot of my own time doing the workbook in order to get all his finances in order. So on the workbook I kept invoices, I logged invoices, I logged all the expenditure and invoices, and I made it simpler for the auditor to be able to look through all the records and stuff. And when the auditor came and he started going through all the expenditures, he had some questions about the way wasn't aware that he had to get permission from the diocese for expenditures over a certain amount of money, like £10,000, any project that was larger than £10,000. And throughout the time that he's been in the church, he has never sought permission from the diocese for any of his expenditure. So one of the things that he asked me to do to prepare for the audit was to say, well, we'll just allocate cost around so it looks like, and the money wasn't being spent on one particular project, £10,000.
So in a way he was trying to...
Yeah, he was trying to, rather than saying that we spent £10,000 on the roof, we'll just spread it over over different expenditures. So he
actually said that to you, that he was going to basically reallocate where the money was. So he wasn't being completely honest or transparent about where the money had been spent. Even though it was for genuine repairs and things that needed doing, but because he knew he would have had to have asked permission from the diocese, he slightly fiddled with what he was doing.
Yeah, it's sort of, there's different categories for different expenditure. So we did, spread it all out. When we had the audit in July, he passed that, and thanks to my workbook, he was able to pass it. Then after that, I started noticing how he was spending money. He was always buying expensive things. He spent a lot of money installing air conditioning into the priest's house, and he'd had an air conditioning machine in every single room. I thought that was a little bit excessive, to be honest, because nobody in Deptford would have air conditioning.
It seems to be there's a discrepancy between the way he was living and the way and all the money that he was asking the parishioners to contribute, and it seems as though they were unclear as to where some of their money is going. So there's a gap between the way he lived and the way his parishioners were living, and it sounds...
Yeah, well, he was, because one of the things I suggested, well, why don't we take photographs of how the presbytery look and post it on the website so that people can see that there is work needed to be done and money is needed. So it essentially to be more transparent of how it is. Yeah. So I did that, and he gave me his phone, and we went around the house and we started taking photos, and I did some videos and stuff. When I took the photo of the room, he said to me, don't include the air conditioning in the photographs. Yeah. Because if the parishioners won't understand, and he doesn't, and they will ask me questions, and he didn't want to be questioned about the air conditioning because they were expensive machines.
Yeah, so they were expensive. That proves that he was already aware that parishioners would feel a bit upset by the fact that he was spending money on air conditioning for every room, and when they themselves were probably living in far inferior standards.
Yeah. So he said, don't include the photographs. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just noticed that he was getting parishioners to donate more money, and also what he was spending on, it seems to me that it was disproportionate to the amount of money that we were collecting, and also, and also the living standards of this area. Mm-hmm. Like, for instance, he spent, I started talking to my friends about, I told my friends about some of the things that I saw and I wasn't happy with. But I never spoke to him about it. I never confronted him about it.
What did your friends suggest you do when they heard the stories the things that were troubling you? What did your friends?
Well, some of them suggested I should speak to the priest. Mostly, it was just we felt maybe it wasn't that our business. It wasn't our business to question.
Yeah,
the priest was
already you'd started to feel a bit uncomfortable, but you decided to sort of quash your doubts and fears and just carry on.
Yeah. Okay. So. And the other thing I saw was he bought this fridge that was that had computer screen, and it needed water to be plumbed directly from the tap into the fridge. So it was quite a high tech fridge. That was about £2,500. When I had a meeting with him months later, but I'll come to that. It's like the cost of the fridge was it did come up. So that was. that was one I spoke to my friend about that, and again, it's like I wasn't happy. But then there were other things he was telling me that I wasn't happy about. He told me, for instance, there was lecterns, the lecterns where the priests stand there and they put his books on to read. There was a couple of lecterns there. He wanted to buy new lecterns. He wanted, because the ones there weren't a pair, they didn't match. So he asked for donation for a new lectern. And one of the parishioners donated, offered to pay for a new pair, but he ended up buying just one, and that was about around £700. And he told me one day the reason why he lectern that he was using that was from a donation from one of the parishioners as well, from a parishioner. And he said, I didn't want to get rid of that because it was a donation. So, and then with the second one, he bought that, but he said he didn't like either of them. He thought they were cheap, because they were made of chipboard, rather than real wood, and he thought they were. So, okay, yeah, I said, it looks very nice. I said, it looks very nice. He said, no, it's not. It's chipboard. Then you look at it, it's chipboard, and then it's sort of painted over to look like real wood.
Grandiose idea of how it wasn't even just how he should live, how the church should appear to outside people, and not perhaps taking account of the sort of houses that his own parishioners were living in, the poverty that some of his parishioners had. And slightly taking them for granted in their very generous.
Yeah. So he said, well, the one I really want is made of solid wood, and it cost about £7,000. Give me time. I will get that one eventually. So here's that one as well. And then so that's kind of bothered me. And also so those kind of little comments would, he wanted to, he went on to spend money on big projects, like he installed a new PA system. That PA system was actually a donation also from a parishioner who was rather well off, and she paid for the whole thing. It was about £16,000. So a new PA system where the choir can go and sing from the back of the church rather than the front.
So it does sound as though, in fact, there were quite a few wealthy men that he was able to ask for money. So maybe he just got the wrong end of the stick about, because I think when you challenged him a bit about how some of your parishioners were poor, he was quite style and said things like, well, how do you know, and how do you know? So he did, I can see how he started thinking that they were all quite wealthy, but it's still also true, I think, that in depth there would have been a lot of people who would have been quite shocked to think that he was spending money that people had given to the church for things.
Well, there was donation for his birthday party that the parishioners, but they form a committee for his birthday party, and they raise money for that. He says that he told them he didn't want a birthday party, but now with hindsight, I think he actually manipulated them into that. He said, oh, no, I don't want to have a birthday party. I think I want to have a next year where it will be my 30th anniversary of my ordination. That's more important. So I don't want a birthday party. But the parishioner insisted, said, we're going to give you a birthday party for your 60th.
I think it'd be quite nice, because I think we've had a lot of evidence now about, can we cut to the bit where he started challenging you because you spoke to him? Because also, I think you've also demonstrated very clearly that you were a great help, raise you up and tell people how.
Oh, yeah.
So you established a good relationship with him. And then suddenly, I want you now to cut to the bit where things are starting to get out of control, and you questioned him about some of his purchases, and he became very antagonistic.
Well, that came really when we've had quite a few thefts in the church, money going missing, people just walking in and taking money. We had one incident so he installed new CCTV camera in the church, was also, he received quite a large discount for that. So there was CCTV in the annex, in the secretariat office. So there's CCTV cameras all over the church. Unfortunately, that did nothing to deter the thief, because some guy walked off the street one day, walked into the church, and he stole a few things from the utility room. That was quite a big incident. That was when was in the house, and he was upstairs in the priest's house, whereas the guy went into the church and he was walking around the church. That was because the door wasn't secure. So the guy came in, he walked around the church, he took a few things, and then he walked out the front entrance of the church. And then following that, as well, we're going to spend more money on security. I will make the doors more secure. I was doing when I was going through, because I go through the company accounts every month and I record the income and expenditure in my workbook. I wanted to do that in order to generate the annual report. And one of the things I noticed was he spent £400 on an iron, and I thought, well, that's a bit expensive. And at this time, money was also going down as well. Then I questioned him. And I sent him a couple of messages on WhatsApp, and I said, why did you spend £400 on an iron? That was really expensive. It seems that like it's not a good idea because it will just get stolen again. He got a little irate. He called me in for a meeting when we met. I said to him that £400 is too much money for an iron, and he said I actually bought actually bought two irons for £400 each, so it was £800, and I thought that was. And he says, well, people around here are not rich. He says,
I think a lot of people, as we've demonstrated, obviously some of the parishioners were rich, but I think people around here, because I used to go to this, they're not particularly rich, and there will be a vast majority of people who would be quite shocked that he had spent so much money on an iron when they were probably sort of struggling just to sort of make ends meet on a week-to-week basis. They would have, I think it would have been quite shocking to them to have spent that much on an iron, would you say?
Well, when I said that to him, he said, how do you know? Have you been to their houses? I said, I've lived here for 30 years. I know this area. And he still said, how do you know? Have you been to their houses? And then his man said, well, and he said, you can't speak to me like that. I don't like the way you speak to me. He said to me, if you don't like it, you can resign. That was when he said that to me. I didn't say anything at the time. I didn't resign. I asked him also, he explained to me that he needed this iron because the people who were using the iron were actually burning his clothes, his vestments, his altar server vestments, which were quite expensive, and they didn't know how to use the iron, so they would burn his clothes. And I think he was uncomfortable with the fact that he was being challenged.
Yeah.
And his authority was being questioned, and that's why he was uncomfortable. Before the meeting ended, I asked him, so what's the holiest reason for the fridge? And he said, well, it's a discount from £4,000. And then after that, I left the office. I didn't really say anything more. And then on Saturday, I received a series of text messages from him out of the blue. I shall read you the text messages. They said, I wish to inform you that many things will change in our working relationship. First, I want you to choose your word very carefully in how you address me. Any form of disrespectful words or gesture will not be tolerated. I'm going to inform HR of your recent insubordinate behaviour to the extent that after discussing with you in my office, you are still bent on your views and unwillingness to change. Rather, you went ahead in the same line. And as I mentioned to you, if you are no longer willing to work here, please resign so I may put out an advertisement for a replacement. I cannot tolerate your insubordinate attitude anymore. And that was his messages. I was quite shocked when I received them because they were very harsh and they were out of the blue.
Yes, and also what I'm thinking is, before he was treating you as a friend, when he was asking you not to photograph the air conditioning in the bedrooms and things, he was treating you like an equal. And also, more than an equal who was really helpful to him in managing all his affairs. He would have been in such trouble if he hadn't had you when that sort of
when the audit was going on.
Yeah, would have been in such trouble. And even the very fact that there was an audit was because he had mismanaged things. Yes, so I'm not saying that he was corrupt then, but certainly there's something very strange about suddenly turning on you like this when before he'd been treating you as an equal and asking you to cover up stuff for him. So it seems to me that he's not acting in good faith.
Yeah? Well, yeah, he was very complimentary towards me. Actually, he actually recommended me to a few of his priest friends as well, and he also recommended me to the MSP, his missionary order he came from, because I came up with ideas on how we can increase more donation for the church as well. And because of all the work I've done in the church, redesigning the website, creating the annual report, and producing the newsletter, and also producing the recovering so much money for him, and also because I was able to sort out the company's finances, it brought in more income to the church as well. So all of these things, and he used to be quite fearful that I would leave because I said this was just a temporary job for me until I find something permanent. And he says, well, secretaries worked for 10 years and he didn't, he always said, how am I going to replace you if you leave? So he was always fearful about that. And so these text message, they came as quite a shock to me because after I left the office, I didn't really say anything more after the meeting, but he must have been stewing over the meeting. And
well, it was an overreaction, which tells you that he was worried about you. And also, it sort of seems strange that from being someone who he was really friendly with and regarded as an equal to suddenly start talking about insubordination as though you're his servant. Or, I mean, obviously he is your employer. I can understand that, but surely you'd brought so many advantages to him as an employee that surely he could have had the courtesy to address you in a much nicer way. And purely as a man of God, it seems a very cruel and aggressive message to receive.
Well, after I received the message, the first response I could think of, okay, I'm going to resign then. And I sent him a message back and said, okay, I'll resign. I'm not going. And his final message to me was, please remove or block my number from your phone and WhatsApp. I will be doing the same now. Goodbye and God bless. So essentially, he's telling me, I don't want to see you again.
It makes me laugh a bit, though. It's such a cruel, nasty message, and suddenly putting God bless at the end of it seems a little bit strange to me.
Yeah, especially from a man of God. So
exactly.
And then after that, he just put it into the following day. He announced to the church that I had left, and didn't really give a reason for my departure. I essentially left the same day. I resigned the same day, and I left the same day. For several reasons, is that I wasn't comfortable with him anymore because that message showed me that he can be dishonest, he can be vindictive, and I didn't trust being alone with him in the church because I work alone with him. I wasn't sure if he would, maybe if he wanted to get rid of me, he might plant something on me or do something and I wouldn't be able to defend myself because it would just be my word against his. And he is a priest. He has been in the parish a lot longer than I have, and he knows the parishioners a lot more than I do.
Yes. Now I gather that sometime after this, without you doing anything, somebody consulted you or somebody got in touch with you to say that they were worried about the amount of times they were being asked for donations and the pressure they were feeling to donate to the church. Yeah. So could you tell me a little bit about that? The person that got in contact with you?
After that, I made a complaint about his attitude to HR, the diocese, and I think they've just brushed it under the carpet and said no. But I know that I'm not the only person who was dissatisfied with his spending habits. And one of the parishioners contacted me recently to ask me why I left, and he wanted to know the full story. And he says, this is not new. I've had problems with, and I've been making complaints about him to the MSP, to his order as well. And so I'm on your side here, and I fully support you. I think the priest should not be here anymore. To be honest, after I left, I didn't really say anything to anybody because, like I said, I haven't been in the church for that long. I don't really know too many people.
Well, that's really interesting, though, isn't it? Because you weren't seeking this communication from him. You just assumed that because you hadn't been there for as long as the other parishioners, they would probably be more on the father's side. But so that's quite interesting that someone else, quite independently, had noticed that there was something quite strange going on with all the pressure to donate, and was worried about the father and wanted to support you. So I think that is a real signal that they appreciated your honesty and they trusted you, as against perhaps what the father was doing. It does seem to me that is a very significant thing that happened.
Yeah, I think, and his, I haven't actually said, but other things kind of made me, and I came to realize that his how he was so obsessed with with money. I knew it before, but those text messages really confirmed his attitude towards money and towards the parishioners as well. I remember the time, for instance, when a couple of funerals in the church, they were taking place around the same time and they're in the same week. And then there was another event, I think it was a baptism or confirmation pretty much around the same time. But what happened was that the church toilet had broken because it wasn't very well done by the previous priest, so it didn't last very long. And then this time it just broke and it would not function. So I suggested that we hire Portaloo, and we hired a couple of Portaloos for £500 for the month, for a month, and the priests actually got the families of the bereaved, the two deceased parishioners, is somehow persuaded them to donate towards the Portaloo, and so they gave £250 in full. And the thing was, this is why I confronted him about the irons, because had he not spent £800 on iron, there would be money to cover for the loo. There was no need to ask parishioners to donate towards the loo at all.
That's exactly the problem, isn't it? That it's not just about his decision on how to spend the money. And when there are more pressing things, then it does seem a bit strange that he spent so much money on a couple of irons and other things as well. They start to just feel a bit hypocritical to keep asking people to donate so much money for things that seem quite essential, and then to know that a lot of money has been spent over and above what a normal person would spend on things like irons and fridges. Yeah.
And also to be asking people who are grieving for their family for donation.
Yeah, exactly.
When it was, they'd already pay a lot of money towards the funeral.
It's a very vulnerable time, that, anyway. So, and I think people often get slightly pressured into spending more than they want to because they want to show that they, respect for the person who's died. And so it's a very, very unpleasant time to start pressurizing them for money.
Yeah, it was wrong, in my opinion, to do that. There was also a time when we received a legacy donation of £20,000 into the church. And that was quite a lot. I mean, that was early in the year. And rather than spending the money on the parishioners, maybe he was still asking people to donate towards altar server vestments and also the new lectern books. So they donated towards that. Again, they didn't have to. And the £20,000, I don't know what he spent that money. I haven't spent that, on the church. But at the time, I was saying to him, "How about we organise a trip to Walsingham for the parishioners? Hire a
wonderful
trip."
Yes.
Well, his attitude was that if they want to go, they have to donate towards that themselves. And again, I said, "Well, that's not necessary, really. That's a coach would cost about £500-600, and we had money. We did have the money. I mean." Money.
It seems that his priorities weren't what you'd expect of a priest, put it that way.
No. And again, it's like I said, and then it really hit me that how he was so obsessed with money. I mean, one time I had said to him, "Boy, you need to have a project plan for all the restoration work you're doing." And I created an Excel spreadsheet workbook for him, and I sat him down and I showed him that this is how you use it. But the first thing he said to me was, "Is this going to bring me more money?" It's like, I was so crass.
Yes.
I just thought it's
and again, it's exactly the opposite of what you expect from a priest. You think your priorities should be more sort of kindness, goodness, humility, to be extremely unmaterialistic. And then to have someone who is so materialistic is quite extraordinary.
There's also, like, I know he wants to spend the money on the house, and I think the feeling among the parishioners is that he's buying all these things for their prosperity, but he can't keep them because they belong to the church. So when he leaves, they stay behind. But that's not the point. The point is, like, he's spending that money. I mean, none of the parishioners see the house, so they're not going to benefit from whatever it is he's spending. Or whatever it is.
Yes, it seems like he's prioritizing his comfort. I mean, that's what it appears to be.
Yeah.
And obviously that might be completely incorrect, but from what you've said so far, it certainly sounds like it.
he's prioritizing comfort and luxury for himself and the priest, and not really
the opposite
the
of what
parishioners.
Jesus Christ asked people to do.
Yeah. So fine, they don't keep the goods, but it's that house is turning into kind of a palace for the priest, when really I would have expected a priest who takes a vow of poverty to be living in the same condition as the people, as the people, rather than to not really care whether he drives a BMW or Vauxhall Corsa or something like that.
It just seems strange. Very strange.
I mean, my time with I did see, just having conversations with him, and I said this to my friend about the things like when he said he wanted a lectern that's like £7,000. Well, if you are in the Vatican, you can have a lectern for £7,000, but in this church, that's chipboard lectern, which looks quite decent enough. It's
prioritize
fine.
your parishioners, not
and we have people. We have weekly food donate with food banks and everything as well. So it just seems that he's prioritizing himself. Like, for instance, he gave himself. He's allowed a food allowance. He increased his food allowance from £400 to £500 within a year. But when I asked for a pay rise, because I felt all the work that I was doing for the parish, all the skills that I was bringing far exceeded what a secretary was doing. And I said, I think, I'd like to have a pay rise to £20 per hour. He refused to give me that. And one of the meetings he said, you're just annoyed because I haven't given you a pay rise. But again, it's like he's depriving people rather than himself. We have the money to pay for it. It's not. And it's not even like I'm.
Yes, I agree. It's sort of very cruel to make that assumption that you asking for a pay rise is linked with anything other than needing it. And also it's a little bit strange, and probably it's probably not strange. It's probably the reason that he became so incredibly aggressive and hostile towards you was because he knows you've got a lot of information, like some of the things you've already revealed, which could make him look bad. So I think that's the reason why he suddenly switched and became so aggressive in his communication.
I think it's more the fact that he doesn't care about how the parishioners live, and he only cares about himself. So he doesn't care if other people are poor. So he only cares the fact that he's not poor. That's why he didn't want to spend any money giving me the pay rise, because my well-being was not important to him at all. And it's not even this is about the pay was in line with the work that I was doing for the parish, with the skills that I have, which though that it was not. I mean, it's actually less than what I would be paid if I was working somewhere else in a company.
I'm
I
sure
was doing so much.
And so your reason for doing this podcast now is just to make people aware of some of the anomalies between what he purports to be and what he actually does. Is that what you would say, that he's sort of overstepped the mark in asking for these donations? Basically, you're saying there should be more transparency about what the money is being spent on, and there should surely at some level parishioners who are being constantly pressurized for donations should know what it is their money is being spent on. Would you say that's your priority?
The reason for the podcast is really to put the truth out there. I believe that Father hasn't been telling the truth about my leaving. Like, I haven't been back to the church since the day I left, and that in itself should be enough to raise question marks.
Precisely, because obviously you didn't leave on good terms, and it's very important that these people, the person who contacted you, they took it upon themselves to contact you. It wasn't that you were trying to stir up trouble, but now that you've been, in a sense, justified in your concerns by someone else having similar concerns, it seems a good time to, at least tell your side of the story. Let's say that. And people can make up their own minds. You've told your story. Let them make up their own minds from what they know of you and from what they know of the Father.
Yeah, well, for some people, I think Father gave them the impression that I'd left because I found a new job. And otherwise, he hasn't really told them the truth.
No. Exactly.
And I feel that
speaks for itself.
Yeah. And also, when I complained with the HR in the diocese, they haven't actually taken the grievance seriously, because they haven't responded to me since I submitted a letter.
Rude and upsetting. It's very unkind, for someone that's supposed to be the HR for a Christian organization.
It's not a church
organization, a religion. It's very strange to be so unconcerned about someone being very what seems to me from your story to have been very badly treated.
Again, it comes down to the fact that this is a Catholic church, and they have strict safeguarding rules for staff and also for parishioners, like the young and the old, and ensuring that they're protected. And he has a priest who doesn't think twice about mistreating his parishioners if he doesn't. I haven't been back to the church since, because I'm essentially, from his last message, it just makes me feel uncomfortable to be back in there, because it's a hypocrisy. This person doesn't even care about God. I don't really think that. I think sit there and
as you and I are both Catholic, it does seem to be going against what we expect of a Catholic priest. And the other thing that is even more upsetting is, because there's been so much publicity about corruption in the Catholic Church, some of which has been proven, a lot of, all the more reason for, at the local level, for the priest to be extremely concerned to act justly and wisely, and in regard to the precepts of Christianity.
His behaviour was completely out of order, and there were times I questioned myself whether or not in the right profession,
because he might be better in a different profession.
I mean, I haven't been the Catholic for very long, and I always thought, yes, priests take a vow of poverty, and you expect the priest to be going with a leprosy colony and working with those serving the poor like that.
Certainly not, apparently. I mean, again,
not a priest who's serving himself.
It sounds as though the parishioners are being a little bit ripped off, and maybe they're not, but certainly an investigation, I would have thought, what everything you've said, I would have thought would have at least instigated an investigation into him, because if this isn't true, then he needs to clear his name. But it sounds as though it's very highly unlikely that he can clear his name, and that's why I think all the more reason for you to have made the podcast and at least ask for these concerns to be cleared up.
Well, thank you very much for being here today, Julia, and we'll just end this podcast now. Thank you.